Coming to you from Emerald's 31st Annual Groundhog Day Investment Conference, my name is Elliot Foster. This year's theme is the innovation economy. Innovation starts small. I'm here with our analyst, Nate Jones. Nate covers technology and hardware for Emerald. I think you've been here about 10 years?
Yep.
Yeah. Coming up on his 11th year. Let's just jump into it. Nate, it seems that AI infrastructure spending began in earnest in 23. What comes next?
Well, first of all, this wave is definitely not done. We're seeing a lot of follow through on the current wave of investments that are occurring, especially with regard to data center infrastructure. But I think as the year progresses, we're going to start to see more real world use cases for the infrastructure that's being deployed, and the end applications are going to proliferate rather rapidly and become more noticeable to the average person. And I'll get into some examples in a minute. But also on the hardware and infrastructure side, we're also going to see more use cases pushed to the edge. And what that means is we're going to see proliferation of different things that wouldn't immediately be intuitive, like AI processors right on your PC. So we're going to see a wave of AI computers coming to market for the first time ever, with trillions of parameters that they can incorporate into the outputs that they're giving. So essentially, ChatGPT moved from the cloud right onto your device would be the best analogy. And then kind of looking at, other use cases, some examples, we're seeing advertising campaigns that are never touching human beings. They're new ones that are being launched, and that's adding productivity on a sales and marketing budget, unlike something we've seen in a long time. And then that money can then be reinvested back into the AI infrastructure that's saved on OpEx and lead to more and more capital deployments and another round of productivity increases. So it's going to be a virtuous cycle of productivity increases. Another quick example, Stacy at her PM panel discussed the drive-through workers as an example there. The hardware aspect of that, we're getting to a point where you're going to have these blade server devices that have the embedded compute power, parallel compute power, to be able to essentially take your order within a year or two. At some of these bigger chains, you may not know that it's not even a human that's taking your order anymore. And so it's just going to get to be to a point where these use cases are going to proliferate, and the investment wave is going to continue for quite a long time.
Yeah. In the white paper, you argue that AI-focused workloads are leading to a fundamental re-architecting of the data center in its entirety. What do you mean by that, and why? What are the implications?
So it is a very complex topic, so I'll try to keep it brief. Essentially, in the past, you would have computing in the data center take place in a fairly standardized process. And as we would get successive generations of compute, you would get an incremental benefit in terms of speed and performance, and then it would become fairly standardized, and the hardware itself would become commoditized. Now, in the world of parallel compute, which is GPU based, and essentially creates an almost brain-like structure for how things are being, you've heard of large language models and the neural networks that are required. Well, that also takes very different hardware configurations to run and operate those. And so you get a near continuous proliferation of new hardware designs and capabilities. And so that just is going to keep first of all, the hardware from commoditizing, but also the need for a near limitless reconfigurations of the hardware for each use case. So autonomous driving will have models that are completely different from the thing we just talked about with the drive-through. And so you're going to need to continually retrain and develop new inference models. And it's just going to create a complexity that's never been there on the compute side before.
How much data center expansion investment is required to accommodate AI requirements over the next several years?
That's a great question. So there's a bunch of different projections, but in the first 22 years of the internet, there were about 20 gigawatts of data center power capacity that have been built. So 22 years. Projections are, depending on which source you use, between 2027 and 2030, we'll have anywhere from 37 to 50 gigawatts of power. So within the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to see a more than doubling of what was accomplished, or around a doubling of what was accomplished in the first 22 years of the industry. And as one last data point on that, just in the fourth quarter, there were 1.5 gigawatts of new data center capacity leased. So roughly 7% of the entire market that exists today over 22 years just contracted new leases in just one quarter.